Failure to stand on one leg for 10 seconds? Powell says soft landing, very challenging. China's property slumps is a bigger threat. Chinese developer accepts wheat garlic as payment. Ecuadorian protests over cost of fuel and food. The global currency wars have begun. Thai cuts imports of liquefied natural gas, risking fuel crunch. A university officially trademarks the word "the."
Hello, I'm Johnny. Thank you for joining us on FUNDAY News. It's June 24th, Friday, and here are your top stories. A latest study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine revealed middle-aged people who can't stand on one leg for at least 10 seconds appear to be at higher risk of dying within a decade. In the study, the proportion of deaths among people who failed the test was significantly higher at 17.5% than among those who passed at 4.5%. The researchers didn't find any specific cause of death tied to balance, but people tend to maintain their balancing ability until they reach their 60s, when it starts to rapidly decline.
Researchers said more than 680,000 people die each year from falls globally, and the 10-second test can be easily used to help identify those who may be vulnerable. In a study, participants were asked to lift one foot and place it behind the opposite lower leg, without touching the ground, while keeping their arms at their sides and looking forward. They were allowed 3 attempts. The results stemmed from a study among 1,702 people over age 50 in Brazil. 1 in 5 failed the test, generally those who were older or in poorer health.
After the U.S. Federal Reserve raised its benchmark lending rate 75 basis points with another 75 basis point increase on the table next month, the Fed Chair Jerome Powell said he did not see the likelihood of a recession as particularly elevated right now, but considered that it was certainly a possibility. He said, "A soft landing is our goal. It is going to be very challenging. It has been made significantly more challenging by the events of the war and of commodities prices and further problems with supply chains."
Good morning, everyone.
Bloomberg reported the Fed's chair's remarks in his most explicit acknowledgement to date that steep interest rate hikes could tip the U.S. economy into recession. Fed officials have admitted that they were too slow to tighten and are now trying to increase front-load rate in the most aggressive policy pivot in decades. Powell believed financial conditions have tightened and priced in a string of rate increases, and that's appropriate. He pledged to lawmakers, "We can't fail on that task. We have to get back to 2% inflation."
Bloomberg reported while global attention is focused on the economic impact of coronavirus lockdowns in Shanghai and Beijing, the slump in China's housing market is likely to have even more profound implications. An official index that tracks apartment and house sales has posted year-on-year declines for 11 months straight. With demand for services and commodities generated by housing construction and sales accounting for about 20% of gross domestic product, that represents a big drag on growth this year.
Goldman Sachs estimated the property market pain is expected to crimp China's growth by 1.4% this year. Some economists think that the growth getting to 3% would be a struggle, much lower than a 5.5% official goal. The Lowy Institute believed that even if China can avoid a financial crisis from the housing decline, lower investment will drag overall GDP growth to an average of about 4% for the rest of this decade. The Lowy Institute found investment in housing accounts for about 11% of China's GDP, and that will fall closer to 7% by 2030.
To stimulate demand as China's property market slump persists, one developer is trying to entice farmers to buy homes by accepting their crops as payment. Central China Real Estate is offering to pay farmers as much as 160,000 yuan for their wheat to offset down payments for homes in its River Mansion residential project in Shangzhou. Weeks ago, it offered to accept garlic from growers looking to buy homes in another project in Kaifeng City. Media reported Central China is the 37th largest builder in China.
Media said the Central China's move reflects how far some developers are willing to go to attract wary homebuyers as the economy slows and the industry endures a crippling cash crunch. It was offering to buy wheat at 4 yuan a kilogram, higher than the record 3 to 3.1 yuan that China's state stockpiling company was purchasing the grain for earlier this month. Similarly, for garlic, Central China offered to pay 10 yuan a kilogram last month. That's higher than the 6.92 yuan wholesale price as of June 10th.
After violent clashes between soldiers and demonstrators armed with guns, spears, and explosives took place Tuesday night in Puyo, an Amazonian city, thousands of indigenous protesters held a peaceful march through Ecuador's capital, Quito, on Wednesday to demand that President Guillermo Lasso address price rises that have ignited 10 days of demonstrations across the country. The police said 114 police officers have been injured and 104 people detained nationwide.
Reuters reported demonstrations led primarily by indigenous group Konei began last week with peaceful roadblocks, but levels of violence have escalated in some areas, prompting conservative ex-banker Lasso to decree a state of exception in 6 provinces. Konei said on Wednesday afternoon it has sent a letter to Lasso outlining their terms. The government said it was analyzing the communication with a view to beginning a productive dialogue.
After the cost of everything from fuel to food to appliances soaring, strengthening buying power has suddenly become more important for the Central Bank of Developed Nations. But how? On June 16th, Switzerland surprised traders with the first rate increase since 2007, sending the franc soaring to its highest level in 7 years against US dollar. Bloomberg reported the value of currencies has emerged as an ever larger part of the inflation equation. The central banks of developed nations have targeted stronger currencies.
Bloomberg said, the foreign exchange world is calling it the reverse currency war because for more than a decade, countries sought the opposite. A weaker currency meant domestic companies could sell goods abroad at more competitive prices, aiding economic growth. But now, to welcome a stronger currency can help reduce the cost of imports by boosting buying power abroad, with a rate increase a way to tame the inflation. The US dollar had been soaring up 7% for the year as the Fed boosted rates.
Bloomberg reported North Asian spot prices for LNG have jumped around 50% this month, taking them to more than triple what they were a year ago. According to traders, due to skyrocketing prices and limited availability, the state-run energy company PTT Public Company Limited of Thailand is curbing imports of liquefied natural gas. The media outlet said Bloomberg shipping data show PTT's LNG overseas purchases are down by 35% so far in June from the same period in May.
Bloomberg said, Thailand isn't in a crisis yet, but the prevalence of gas in its power mix does raise the threat of rationing or blackouts. Almost 2/3 of the nation's electricity was generated from natural gas in the first 4 months of the year. The traders argued, while they plan to boost purchases of cheaper alternatives like diesel and fuel oil, the deficit left by cutting LNG may be too large to be filled by other sources. But Thai Deputy Government spokeswoman Rachada Nadirek said Thailand isn't struggling to get supplies.
Media reported the Ohio State University has settled a rivalry that has spanned nearly 3 years. The OSU has officially registered a trademark for the most common word in the English language, the. Under an agreement, the OSU can use the trademark on athletic and casual wear, while Marc Jacobs' focus is primarily high-end fashion. Since the trademark applies only to clothing, you won't have to pay a trademark infringement fine to Ohio State for using the in conversation.
Media reported the trademark approval now gives Ohio State permission to use the for clothings, namely t-shirts, baseball caps, and hats. Of all the foregoing promoted, distributed, and sold through channels customarily to the fields of sports and collegiate athletes, anyone familiar with the Buckeyes has certainly heard the emphasis placed on the Ohio State University. The was first used on OSU merchandise back in 2005 and has been stuck with the school ever since.
And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on FUNDAY News. I'm Johnny Wu, your host. I'll see you next time.